All right, everybody, we here again for the book reading for Aaron Dixon's autobiography. Uh, you know, this been a couple weeks now. I want to say this 4 or 5 weeks we've been reading My People Are Rising, the memoir of a Black Panther captain. As everyone know, the Seattle chapter was the first chapter outside of California. So this is an important book. Not only do I feel like it's very comprehensive, with Aaron Dixon, he's going to tell you about the good, bad, ugly, and I think for our generation, we need to see all sides of the picture so we can make better decisions, not make some of the same mistakes, but also learn the good things that they was able to accomplish and be able to apply and adapt some of those today. I think I let ones know in this book reading program in our group chat, Aaron Dixon will be on here May the 26th. So when we finish reading his autobiography, he's going to be coming on speaking to the Second Rainbow Coalition. Definitely would like all the comrades that possible can attend, come out. Check it out. You have a firsthand talk with him. You can ask him any questions you want. He's a very approachable comrade. I think y'all enjoy the discussion and dialogue we're going to have with him. So this week, we're going to jump right into the reading of My People Are Rising. I'm going to be reading off the PDF this week. I forgot my book. So I'm going to be reading off the PDF. Me and Johnny Torres, he's going to be my other moderator tonight. So we're going to jump right into it. This is Huey and the UN that we're going to be reading. All right, so I'm going to get right to it. Says, diviner of the roadways, the knock beetle. It just passed by here, the knock beetle. Miriam Makeba. I know she was a singer in South Africa at that time. I want to say she was married to Kwame Ture, which is also known as Stokely Carmichael. All right, so we're going to start this chapter 13, Huey and the UN. At national headquarters in Oakland, the party was gearing up for the July trial of the Minister of Defense, Huey P. Newton, charged with the murder and the death of the Oakland police officer. When Huey had entered the Alameda County Jail in October 1967, he had left behind a core group of about 25 to 30 Panthers. Now the party had exploded to well over 3,000, scattered throughout the United States. Free Huey posters was plastered all over the buildings and walls from New York to Los Angeles. The party refrain was the sky's the limit if Huey is not set free. Chairman Bobby traveled relentlessly throughout the states and Europe, organizing support committee and party chapters, attracting thousands of supporters all over the world. An alliance had been formed with SNCC, drafting the leaders into the party central committee. Black Panther Party Chief of Staff David Hilliard and Captain Landon Williams attempted to travel to Cuba to solicit support for Huey's trial, but were detained in Mexico City by the FBI. We wore free Huey buttons to our free Huey buttons on our leather coats and fatigue jackets, like medals of honor, hoping that someday Huey would come home. Huey P. Newton was our guiding force. He embodied everything a Black superhero could possibly be. It was Huey who had the courage to lead a band of armed and well-disciplined Black men to confront equally armed white racist police officers, putting an almost immediate halt to the police brutality against and the murder of the Black citizens of Oakland. And as a result, he became a wanted, hunted man, eventually cornered and threatened with death. Bobby Seale, knowing Huey's importance to the movement, dedicated himself to freeing the Minister of Defense. Right after departing Seattle back in April, Chairman Bobby immediately went on a tour. organizing Black Panther chapters or branches all across the country, mainly for the purpose of expanding the movement to make sure the government understood we would not stand by and let Huey be unjustly convicted. There were free Huey rallies throughout the world. The popular poster of Huey and the Wicker cheer turned up in far-flung places like the Philippines, India, Japan, and throughout Europe and South America. And with Huey's trial starting in late July, the party wanted to leave nothing to chance. One evening, Chairman Bobby called. He told me to fly to San Francisco on Saturday and call for further orders. Call for. The next morning, Lou, Jack, and I were on the first flight to San Francisco. When I landed, I called national headquarters as the chairman had instructed. We were told to wait at the airport. Eldridge Cleaver, Bobby, and others would meet us there. About 4 hours later, Chairman Bobby arrived along with Eldridge and Sherman Banks, captain of the Southern California chapter. Sherman came in place of Bunchy Carter, the chapter's deputy minister of defense, who had stayed in Los Angeles to drill and prepare the troops for Huey's upcoming trial. Both the Huey brothers, Walter and Melvin, came along, as well as Emory Douglas, the minister of culture. We all hopped on a red-eye flight to New York. On the flight, Chairman Bobby explained to me that a delegation of Panthers was going to go to the UN to meet representatives in an attempt to persuade them to intervene in Huey's trial, with the ultimate goal of addressing the General Assembly. James Foreman of SNCC, who had connections that could get us into the UN, would lead the delegation. The plan was for the Panthers to full uniform to hold free Huey flags, one next to each other, of the UN member nations. The party knew how to use the dramatic to its advantage. This display was intended to symbolize for the world the importance of our leaders receiving a fair trial, and also bring attention to the larger human rights issues of the plight of Black people throughout the ghettos of the United States. Stokely Carmichael and several New York Panthers, including Chairman's brothers, a cat who had to be the oldest party in the Panther in the party, met us at the airport. After a fast, wild ride with Stokely behind the wheel, we arrived at his house, where we all sat down to talk. I was blown away when his wife, Miriam Makeba, the famous South African singer living in exile, was introduced to us. I wasn't expecting to meet Miriam Makeba on this trip. I had grown up listening to her music and reading about the courageous stand she had taken against apartheid and the South African government. She said very little, barely even looking us in the eyes as she quietly served refreshment. The whole time we were at Stokely's house, I was amazed to be in the same room as the beautiful, gifted Miriam Makeba. I feel that we men should be paying homage to this true African queen, not being humbly served by her. Many years later, I learned about Stokely's abusive behavior towards Miriam Makeba. The Black woman was subservient to the Black man was a mentality that pervaded many Black nationalist organizations. And it would be something Stokely would have to change if he were to remain a member of the Black Panther Party. The party's official position set by the Central Committee was that women were equal to men and that women had the power to do anything a man could do. However, in the day-to-day activity, things didn't always turn out that way. It was a constant struggle to change the thinking of men in the party. I had been inspired by Stokely as a student at Garfield, and then had met him several times when we were both in Oakland. He had been one of my heroes. The flame of the struggle, the flame of struggle had been lit by his fiery words, but he was different from Bobby, Eldridge, and other Panthers. In Oakland, I had watched Stokely. He seemed uneasy, unsure of himself around hardcore Panther brothers, most of whom had not gone to college or even entertained the ideal of higher education, while Stokely was a graduate of the very competitive Bronx Science High School and Howard University. Those Those early California Panthers were some righteous, stomped down brothers, ex-thugs, hoodlums, pimps, as well as some serious college students. But they all had in common a real honest, hard side. They were genuine, unpretentious, serious, yet easygoing. I guess Stokely could tell that the brothers and the sisters were about as real as you would ever find. Emory Douglas, Walter Newton, Captain Banks, and I ended up in a cramped, stuffy apartment of the 18-year-old New York chapter captain Juden Ford. Juden was a year younger than me, and I could see he had his hands full in keeping the newly formed New York chapter moving. I could relate, and I sympathize with him. In his nature, he seemed even younger than 18. And I wonder how long he would last and how he would handle the older brothers and sisters. I noticed that Chairman Bobby seemed to like assigning young brothers at the helm. He probably liked the enthusiasm and the fearlessness of the young people. And I don't think he looked at youth as a limitation. After all, little Bobby Hutton had been 16 when he became the party's first member. That evening, I called my parents to let them know I had arrived safely. My mother, unfortunately, had to give me some very bad news. Granddaddy, my grandfather on Poppy's side, had passed from a massive stroke. I was stunned, unprepared to hear such devastating news. My first instinct was to run and hide to find a closet somewhere to be alone. But for security reasons, we were not allowed to leave the premise. So I went onto a small balcony and looked up into the sky, drifting off into the memories of Granddaddy. He had been such an important part of my life, as he was in all 6 of his grandkids. I thought about the summers in Chicago, sitting on his lap on the porch after supper. Granddaddy rubbing his whiskers against our faces. A giant of a man, he used to let us all climb on his back and wrestle and tussle with him. He would sometimes tickle us until we cried from laughter. We caught lightning bugs while he played one of his many harmonicas, and we listened to his stories of our father as a young boy. He had never seen him angry and had never seen him in despair. I remember how he loved his Limburg cheese and beer. I don't know that. Buzz Blue Ribbon. Often adding raw eggs to his glass. He would be sorely missed. After some time alone out in the muggy New York night, I finally went in and rejoined the others, trying to put aside my personal loss in order to prepare for the upcoming event, knowing that Granddaddy will always be with me. The next day, I found myself sitting on a hardcore wood bench in a hot, stuffy outer office, the national headquarters of SNCC. Eldridge Cleaver, Chairman Bobby, and Melvin Newton was inside James Foreman's office, along with Stokely, talking about the plans for the UN operation. In the outer room, I sat with Emory Douglas, Captain Banks, and Walter Newton in the sweltering heat, watching the old clock on the wall as we got to know each other and wonder how long this meeting was going to last. There were several SNCC field marshals in the building. One of them was Crutch from Los Angeles. I noticed they weren't really friendly towards us, but I didn't know why. We could hear the voices in James Foreman's office getting louder. It was obvious there was tension mounting behind the closed door. Sonny boy, as Huey called his brother Walter, was straight from the streets, and diplomacy was not one of his strong points. What the fuck are you doing in there? They better not be bullshitting around. I'm hurt. I'll hurt you motherfuckers behind my brother. Emory and I tried to calm Sonny boy down as he placed the floor, threatening to storm into the closed door beating. The voices were getting louder and sounded angrier. Suddenly was a loud bam, and we could hear Eldridge cursing using a plethora of motherfuckers. Minutes later, the 3 Panthers came storming out, followed by the short, stocky James Foreman. Foreman had been another hero of mine, probably of many others as well. Let's get the fuck out of here, Eldridge barked. We left in a hurry with Emery and me coaxing Sonny Boy out of the building. We hopped in our car and pulled off. That punk was trying to make a power play. Party don't play that shit, said Bobby, Chairman Bobby. You see, he bought this field marshals up here. Fuck it. It was supposed to get us into the UN. Fuck these job niggas. These job ass niggas. I didn't know what had happened in the meeting with James Foreman, but it was obvious things hadn't gone as planned. Apparently, there were serious disagreements between the Panthers and Foreman as to how the UN plan was going to work. An activist long before Bobby and Eldridge Cleaver became revolutionaries, Foreman evidently wanted to make sure the party understood who was in charge. He had even brought his field marshals up to New York, a move that to us seemed an effort to intimidate the party. The reality, however, was that no one intimidated the party. Not the pigs, not the FBI, not Sink field marshals, SNCC field marshals, no one. Nevertheless, the plan to gain interest to the UN and for Bobby and Eldridge to address the General Assembly totally fell apart. The party was left trying to pull together something for the next days, so the whole undertaking would not have been a total failure. Eldridge said he knew someone else who might be able to help us, Mother Moore, who he described as the mother of the Black Power movement. It wasn't long before we made our way up to the high rise in Bronx, where we were introduced to a large woman in yellow flowered African garb, including headdress. Although she didn't have the UN context James Foreman had, she had one whom was able to arrange a meeting at the UN with delegates from Tanzania and several other African nations to be followed by a press conference. All week, the New York Panthers had prepared the baby blue flag with a silhouette of Huey, his tam tilted aside his head. The next day, June 25th, more than 100 Panthers stood at attention holding the Panther flags in front of the flags of each UN member nation. The Panthers delegation went in and met with delegations from several African nations, including the Tanzanian UN representative. We all posed for a group picture and then left. Although we were not successful in our mission, we did get press conference and generated more attention for Huey's upcoming trial. Later, we headed for Lenox Avenue, the famous street in Harlem where Marcus Garvey and Malcolm X had addressed great crowds of Black people. Someone said Chairman Bobby should get up on a box and give a speech. At that time, not many people in New York knew who Bobby Seale was or anything about the Black Panther Party. Chairman Bobby immediately launched into an impromptu speech on Lenox Avenue corner talking about Huey and describing the party's 10-point program and platform. A few people stopped, but most people in New York had not turned on to the party yet. Soon the New York chapter would be well known and it would make a dramatic impact on the ghettos of the city. Emery and I spent the night in a rundown Puerto Rican hotel in Brownsville, Brooklyn. I went out several times to use the payphone to call the office in Tanya. I had never seen anything like the poverty I saw in Brownsville. It looked like a bombed out, deserted hellhole. There were empty, glass-filled lots with weed and grass growing unchecked, broken down buildings, boarded up windows, and liquor stores. Winos and junkies might own vacant street corners. This scene was surpassed what I had seen on Chicago's South Side. One thing was sure, places like this were fertile ground for organizing for the New York chapter would soon be doing. We left New York just as we had come, determined that Huey P. Newton would someday be free, despite whatever obstacles appeared in our path. So that was chapter 14, you know what I mean, of Aaron Dixon's autobiography, My People Are Rising, Memoirs of a Black Panther Party Captain. What's some of the things that kind of like stood out to you, Johnny Torres, in this chapter?
The fact that it's like the beginning of the Black Panther. You're seeing how it forms, You're seeing
Yeah.
like it's starting to grow, like, you know, little by little. And it's good how he's narrating it like we're there right in front of him. We're watching like everyone all come together, and it's like kind of like chaos all around him. And he has it in his mind, goes, man, we need to start this chapter where I'm at, because
Right.
it's about to go down. We need to do something. And you're getting a good glimpse of Bobby Seale. And you know,
Hmm.
he's telling a story of Bobby Seale like no one has ever known him. Like he was starting to trust you know, him. And then he was already giving him, you know, all his, you know, permission to start his chapter. And you know, he really has him under his wing at the moment, and he's learning all
Right.
this stuff, which is good that he's teaching them all this knowledge, and you're seeing it passed on to him, to Aaron Dixon. And it's really good to see this. And they're talking about Huey Newton and everything. They're saying a lot of stuff that I never knew about, you know, these important revolutionaries and in the movement. So it's I just can't wait to, you know, read more about this. But very vivid how he talks about the landscape in the background, the where he's at. He goes like, man, this is like hell just, you know, came over
Right.
here. And it's like I feel like we need to do something about it. You know,
Right.
he has that mind structure like how we have it, how we feel like we need to do something. And not only is he taking action, but he's writing his notes as well. He's writing them in his head because he knows sooner or later I'm gonna write a book about it. And you know,
Hmm.
we're reading it. So it's good how he's foreshadowing his future. Like he's seeing all this and his information is building up inside his mind. And he knows I'm gonna write it sooner or later, but right now I'm taking notes down.
Right. Right. Yeah, I think those are some real good points that you point out, because, like, seeing it from Aaron Dixon's standpoint, I would add on to it. We see like the different relationships that these leaders had with each other. His relationship that Bobby Seale had with like uh James Foreman, Stokely Carmichael, and stuff like that. You know what I mean? Where did we see? Because I always wonder. I was like, why did I knew Stokely Carmichael was a part of the Black Panther Party for a short period of time, but I didn't know like why they started to file out. You know what I mean? And
Yeah,
getting this background story about some of these different dynamics that was happening in the background, you kind of see why, you know, this little power struggles that was going on, where, you know, that it kind of like brought a division among some of these leaders and stuff. And one of the things they also showed me is that like why we shouldn't have egos. You know what I'm saying? Why we should
yeah,
always put the liberation struggle before our positions, before our egos, before any of these personality type of disorders that people bring to the struggle. You know what I'm saying? And these are things that our generation have to learn from. Because, like, just imagine if Stokely and James Foreman and all them would have been stayed, you know, working with the party and stuff like that. You know what I mean? They would have been a lot stronger. You know what I mean? But they allowed their egos and power, you know, shifts of power, you know, ones trying to jockey for power. And it ain't really about that. It's about, hey, what we have to do, how we got to execute it. Whoever is going to lead this, that's fine. You know what I'm saying? But all this, like, I'm older than you and I've been in this movement longer. Like, come on, man. Like, that's nonsense. You know what I'm saying? And that's one thing, like, I feel like our movement have to learn from, and we shouldn't make those same type of stakes. We shouldn't come in with egos and stuff that's going to undermine. Like, at the end of the day, what was the goal? It was to help free Huey P. Newton. He was the one facing trial. You know what I'm saying? Not those leaders, you know what I mean? And they came out there to bring awareness to get Huey, you know, free Huey. You know what I mean? So that's one of the things I take out of this chapter. One of the, you know, one of the innocent, you know, like and I don't say it's unimportant, but I thought that was, you know, I thought the Kwame Ture, Stokely Carmichael was married to Miriam Makeba, you know what I mean? But reading this chapter right here, it confirms because I read this book too, but it's just been a minute. Some of the details and stuff, but It's just ironic how, like, you know, a leader like Stokely Carmichael was very abusive in his relationship. Very, you know, this woman is like a legend at her time, and she have a subservient role within the dynamic dealing with men. You know what I mean? And we see that's like something that generation really wrestled with. You know what I'm saying? And something that our generation, I think we're learning as revolutionaries today. Like, we have revolutionary leaders within our movements and stuff. And a lot of the sisters that's a part of the struggle with the Second Rainbow Coalition, we respect them highly. You know what I mean? Some of them is even more equipped than the men. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
That's a
sure.
part of this. What'd you say?
I said that's for sure.
Yeah, straight up. So, like, I think that's one good thing that came out of us looking back in the past and looking at, you know, some of the mistakes. You know, like he said, the party, that was their political line. You know what I mean? To that the brothers and the sisters, they respected, you know, sisters' full humanity, same full capabilities, just as men, but they struggle with that in day-to-day realities and stuff. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying our generation is like absolutely great at this, but I think we learn from that and we're doing better for our generation. But we got to continue to do so, you know what I mean, to struggle with sexist, patriarchal views, because those are limitations too. You know what I'm saying? That we have to, if we're gonna create a society that's gonna be about the people and about our full humanity being recognized, like we have to also recognize that the woman's struggle is a real struggle, and we have to wrestle against this even with our own patriarchal tendencies that we might have in ourselves that we haven't resolved in ourselves. You know what I mean?
Most
Is there
definitely.
anything you want to add to that, Shamako? So, anything you would like to add, Johnny?
Um, no, I'm good right now.
Okay. Uh, I think one thing is interesting, and we'll go to the next chapter, is
Yeah.
how at this point New York City didn't know about the Black Panther Party. You know, they hadn't made a big impression. Okay, there goes Shamako. Well, was you gonna say something, Shamako?
No, go ahead and finish. I'll hop in after you.
Okay. I thought that was like insightful. You didn't want to say that you get, you know, from this his autobiography, is that New York City, they didn't even know who, you know, Bobby Seale and who Huey P. Newton, the Black Panther Party was. But for us, like, we take for granted when we think about Black Panther Party, it's like three places like immediately come to mind is California, specifically Oakland, you know what I'm saying, Chicago, and New York City. Like, you can't talk about the Black Panther Party, at least not talk about those three chapters, one of them chapters. You know what I'm saying? But we see at this time, like, you know, the Black Panther Party was not even known at that time. So they was just making that headway out there. You know what I mean? I think another interesting point is that, you know, the captain of the New York chapter was 18 years old. You know what I mean? 18 years old. And we know that Aaron Dixon was young himself. I think he was like 18 himself, you know what I mean? 18, 19, something like that, you know. But I was speaking at a event we had here in community convos that we had the other day here in Indianapolis. And I was talking to this young brother that's 19 years old. And I was pointing out the stuff, you know, the age of the Panthers, you know what I mean? I was pointing out, you know, Fred Hampton was 21 years old when he was assassinated. You know what I'm saying? And this brother 19. And I was like, look, I'm telling you this because I want you to understand, like, a lot of the leaders in the past was just the same age as you. You know what I mean? Coming out here, you know, building with the community and taking leadership in, you know, taking the initiative in, you know, some of the changes in the community and being want to be a part of it and stuff. And I think younger people need to hear that, because I think a lot of younger people, especially when they come across, individuals like us that's in our 40s and stuff like that, they feel like, oh, they the leaders. You know what I'm saying? But it's not so much. Age is one factor of many factors. You know what I'm saying? And for the young people seeing they own, I always say this: a real revolutionary leader is two things at the same time. They a teacher and they're a student. They're both. And sometimes we more of a student than a teacher at certain times. You know what I'm saying? And that's even in relation to people that's younger than us or even less educated than us. I talk about in my autobiography, it was my friend that was illiterate that got me to start reading and even started to pick up books about consciousness and understanding history and the struggle. And I was very literate, you know what I'm saying? But this was somebody that was illiterate that was leading me, you know what I'm saying? And that's one thing that people have to, again, put their egos aside and realize when it comes down to it, as revolutionaries, we students and we teachers, you know what I'm saying? And sometimes we have to be humble enough to be students when somebody is helping open our eyes to certain things, you know what I'm saying? So I just wanted to emphasize that because, them Panthers was young, and I like that they keep on putting out. He was 18. You know what I mean? Like little Bobby Hutton was 16, the first recruit in the Black Panther Party. You know what I mean? So we definitely got to get these youngsters started to see that, like, they got a leading role in this struggle as well. Go ahead, Shamako.
Yeah, I feel like I'm about to be like the Mr. Negative guy over here, but so it's interesting to me to think about, like both on the youth tip and on the organic development tip. Like one, the world of revolutionary organizing before the organizing industry, right? Because this is before the organizing industry.
Right.
In fact, this is the era that gives birth to it out of the state's need to control it.
Right.
And so it's so organic.
Right.
And like the beefs that they're having around like leadership and ego are real, but they're also not, at least not at this point, they're also not funded and facilitated
right
by the state and corporations. These are like organic,
right,
real beefs. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I don't know if he's gonna. I'll be interested to see if he talks about it in his book because I read his book. But like the Black Panther chapter in Southern California, and U.S. slaves, and
yeah,
the work they put in that region specifically, which as we know, one of the outcomes of that sort of down the road is the Bloods and the Crips, right?
Yeah.
And so it's see, I want to be careful not to get overly nostalgic, but this is like a golden era, or at least an untainted time, right?
Uh-huh.
So that's one, Mr. Negative.
But I think that's a good point. I don't really see that as a negative. I think that's a real analysis, scientific analysis. Because like y'all always talk about, especially the Poor People's Army, how the nonprofit industry came up and how these social NGOs, it was all about controlling this, to keep control of our movements and stuff. So I think that's a good point. That we should,
and the Black Panthers specifically were like the last straw.
Yeah.
Right, they were like the last. No more of this.
Right. Yeah.
No more of this. No,
right.
This would not happen again.
Right.
I think the other thing is just in terms of the youth, right? And I think about, I don't know if you guys ever thought about this, right? But like, our parents could own a house at 23.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? On like one salary.
Right. Right.
Right. That is not happening today. And
Yeah.
I say that because I almost feel like maturity was more attainable at that time at an earlier age.
Yeah.
Like structurally, you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
Like you could have a job. I mean, even amidst all the oppression, you could have a job and go to school and own a house and not be dying from that.
Right.
You know what I mean? Which
Right.
it's hard to fathom the same way today. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
And I feel like, you know, sort of that plus the I mean, also, you know, and I think we've talked about this before, just media wise, right? Like, you know, you have magazines and yeah, I mean, actually he had mentioned this in his book, right? You had magazines and periodicals. You had a limited amount of television channels, right? And you had a lot of shared culture, a lot of shared information and knowledge. And everybody kind of had to grow up at the same speed.
Mm-hmm.
But you kind of had to, you know what I mean?
Right.
And I mean, I feel like that's I don't know if this was like an intentional. I mean, like the nonprofit. I mean, that was intentional. So I don't know if this is or just a byproduct of market expansion and contraction over time, you know. But I think it's a lot harder for people to find their footing and mature these days.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I didn't even feel like an adult until I was in my 30s.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I don't think I'm that rare.
Right. Yeah. I
And it's
agree.
weird because I grew up too fast and I didn't feel like an adult. However that works. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I think that had actually a really positive effect on organizing in that time. Because I think that's
That's a
part of
good
why
point.
they felt that I mean they were grown and they knew they were grown.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They might have been younger than them, but they were still, you know, they still understood they were men and women, you know?
Yeah. Right.
And that's powerful. Anyway,
Yeah.
that's it.
Man, you be making hella points, you know what I mean? And I agree with like your analysis of that. I think it had a lot to do with how capitalism had socially conditioned that generation, where, like you said, a man, and it usually was the man, because the patriarchy and how the capitalism was working at that time. Like, the family could survive off of one paycheck. I mean, it might be hard, you know what I'm saying? It still might have been the issues, but it still was
It was doable.
It was still doable, you know what I'm saying? And that right there made a lot of them a lot grown quicker. It's just like when I saw like my sister when she got pregnant after, I want to say, high school. I think she was already in college or something like that. But it made her grow up quick. You know what I'm saying? Especially when she had to get her own everything, job, apartment, car. You know what I'm saying? Like, it matured her so quick. You know what I'm saying? So I do see what you're saying by that, because it allowed a lot of the people that were younger to have that introduction into adulthood in a structured way. And when I say a structured way, having your own house, your own car, your own, you know what I mean? But today's time, like, I always talk about that too. I think I talked about that in one of the discussions in the past few weeks, that like today, like, everybody in the household got a job, you know what I mean? And contribute to the household in some type of way.
And some people got two.
And some people got two. Some people even got three. You know what I mean? Got a part-time job on the weekends or something just to manage. And I think that right there, you know, it created a situation where, like, arrested development of a generation. Like, most people like live with their parents a whole lot longer now. You know what I mean? And it's not because they don't want to be independent. It's that it's hard to survive out here. You know what I'm saying? Like, getting an apartment, a car, insurance, and this bill, that bill. Like, and the prices of stuff is always going up. You know what I mean? So it just makes sense for like people to be 25 and 30 years old and nowadays and still actually living with their parents and trying to make it and be supportive. And sometimes the parents want that because it helps them out. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
so
Plus,
I can
plus,
see.
plus, divorce rates are higher.
Yeah,
So
divorce
I mean,
rates.
you know,
Yeah,
people get married maybe in their 20s, get divorced in their 30s, and come back.
yeah. So I think that has a lot to do with why they were a lot more mature. They was in a world where not only the structure aspect, I would say they lived in a time where seeing leaders that was young was normal. They were seeing that in the world, you know what I mean? They were seeing that like with Che Guevara and Fidel Castro and stuff like that at young ages, like leading revolutions and stuff. You know what I'm saying? Leading revolutionary movements. They seeing it in different revolutionary struggles in Africa and stuff. You know, these are revolutionary leaders that's young and stuff that's leading these movements and stuff. You know what I mean? So it was kind of, I would say also the cultural aspect that reinforced the structure as component of how, you know, families and our communities was socially conditioned to accept maturity at a younger age and stuff, and that was normalized and stuff. You know what I mean? Where leaders around the world would look at Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale, even though they was in their mid-20s and stuff. You know, looking at them like, man, serious revolutionary leaders. Where even the FBI looked at Fred Hampton at 21 years old, like, we got to knock him off. Like, this is a serious revolutionary leader that a lot of people around the world will follow. You know what I mean? So yeah, I definitely agree with you that the structural aspect played a big role in people seeing their maturity a lot quicker at a younger age, and assuming that it brings to mind Jonathan Jackson and how, you know, George Jackson talked about Jonathan Jackson. You know what I mean? Like, this is a young man. You know what I mean? He's young, but he's a young man. Like, he's already understanding revolutionary politics. He's already taking initiative in leadership roles. He's already looking at stuff at a very mature mentality. Like, a lot of people nowadays around that same age, we would not be looking at stuff like that. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's a good point, Shamako. I'm glad that you made that point. How you doing, Sister Anna? I guess he listening in the background. Was there anything you wanted to add to that, Johnny Torres, before we get to the next chapter?
No, I'm all good, brother.
Okay. All right. Do you want to lead it off this next chapter?
Yeah, I'll start reading.
Okay.
July 1968, Seattle. The time to hesitate is through. No time to wallow in the mire. Try now, we can only lose. Our love become a funeral pyre. The Doors, Light My Fire, 1967. I love that song. I love that band too.
Oh,
As
okay.
as the Black Panther Party was exploding onto the scene all over the country, unbeknownst,
Unbeknownst.
unbeknownst, unbeknownst to the U.S., known to us, the U.S. government had local law enforcement agencies were
Systematically.
systematically plotting to destroy it. What we did know is that they would try to kill us just as they had killed little Bobby Hutton. In South Central Los Angeles, 3 young Panthers, Tommy Lewis, Robert Lawrence, and Steve Baltimore.
Martha.
Bartholomew?
Man. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Were shot and killed at the gas station by the Los Angeles Pigs as they were getting out of their car. The Los Angeles Panthers were literally catching hell, and in every city where the party opened their office, it would just be a matter of time before the local authorities began to arrest the Black Panthers and sometimes shoot Panther members in cold blood. In Oakland, national headquarters was preparing intensively for Huey's upcoming trial. Panthers all over the West Coast, as well as supporters from around the world, were covering on Oakland. The party was ambient, for we would not allow Huey to go to the gas chamber. And in the minds of Panther uh, party members were preparing for war, truck mound with megaphones sent through East Oakland, West Oakland, Hunters Point, and Fillmore in San Francisco, announcing the trial and calling for mass support. Panthers and dispatched throughout the area, putting up posters, handing out flyers, and talking to the people in the community. The sky is the limit if Huey is not set free, was our mantra,
Yeah, mantra.
mantra, and to no one knew what was going to happen. Back in the back in Seattle, July morning, early one July morning, I headed down to the office hoping to get a head start on the day's activities. When I turned to the corner to walk the final block, I was alarmed at the sight before me. 7 or 8 police cars were parked in front of the office, and ununiformed police officers were walking in and out as some of the police exited. They were carrying items I could not quite make out. My first instinct was to flee and head back home. Instead, I decided to continue and find out what the cops were doing. Just as I headed the office, Curtis Harris drove up and got out of his car. I shouted to the cops, "Hey, what's going on? What are you doing in our office? Are you Aaron Dixon?" One of them blurted. "Yeah," I replied. "You're under arrest for stolen property." Curtis and were immediately handcuffed, taken downtown, jailed, and booked for grand larceny. We were put in separate cells. Curtis was later released after a while. Several plainclothes cops took me upstairs to the detective's office. "Dixon, somebody said that they saw you carrying a stolen typewriter into the office, and that's a felony, punishable by 5 years in the prison. If you cooperate with us, we can work something out." The detective paused immediately to see if I would take the bait. Another detective interjected, "You know, Dixon, some of the older guys think you aren't doing a good job. Some of them think somebody new ought to be the leader." Sitting in the sunlit office, listening to these cops, I was startled by this description of the state of affairs in our chapter. I was fully aware that there was some dissent among the ranks. I was puzzled as to who was providing the cops with information. "I don't know what you're talking about," I answered. "As far as the charge of stolen typewriter went, the accusation might not have been entirely untrue. I realized months later an older brother who often hung around the office told me that someone at Model Cities, a community support program, said we could have a typewriter, which we sorely needed. I had carried that very typewriter into the office, apparently an unwittingly participant in a
In a classic setup. I'm winning
okay.
participant in a classic setup.
Yeah, my screen went blank for a second. Okay, and a classic setup. Eventually, the detectives took me back downstairs and put me in the high security wing on another floor, isolating me from the main part of the jail. I was the only one on that floor, completely separated from everyone and everything, which in some ways was okay for me. This isolation gave me some time to reflect, some valuable time alone, which had been impossible since I have joined the party. I was I was
Angered,
angered by the officers' allegations concerning my leadership, but I was more pursued, yes,
perturbed.
perturbed about who was giving the police information about the internal strife strife in our chapter. I made several phone calls to the office and the home of my parents as word spread about my arrest. Elmer, Willie, and other comrades called a rally at Garfield Park where I had listened to Martin Luther King years earlier. After the rally, they organized a march downtown to the jail, demanding my immediate release. Mike Rosen and the ACLU came down to visit me and impressed concern and intentions were so high we feared a riot would break out. The party position was that riots would fertile and destructive. I wrote a note for Elmer to read at the rally, hoping it would quell the intense emotions and prevent the rally from breaking out into a full scale riot. I could only sit and wait and hope that the comrades would be able to keep the situation under control. I lay in my jail bunk wondering where all this would lead, not realizing this was only the very beginning of a long, violent summer. Later that evening, I heard voices shouting in the distance. I could faintly make out of the words, but as I listened closely, the chorus grew louder and the words came clearer. Free Aaron, free Aaron. It had only been a year since I graduated from high school, just another obscure Black youth unsure of my place or role in this often secretary. Did I say that right?
Contradictory.
Contradictory, focused society, confused society. Now I had become the center of attention of a Seattle's entire Black community. I desperately wanted to get out of jail so a confrontation could be avoided. I knew that dynamics in the community were at the point of explosion, and it did not want to be the cause of a riot that could lead to destruction and possibly death. Seattle had not yet had a big riot. Unfortunately, my arrest would be the spark that would put us on the list with Newark, Detroit, Pennsylvania, Chicago, and many other cities throughout America. I learned later that we marchers had headed back to Garfield Park, where the protests erupted into an explosion of youthful pent-up anger, frustration, and mayhem. Police were attacked cars, were attacked cars with whites in them were stoned, windows of businesses were shattered, and police cars were overturned. Two news reporters were about to be attacked when Elmer intervened. What?
Yeah, intervene.
Intervened and rescued them from a ravaging crowd, escorting them to safety. A full-scale riot had erupted in Seattle. As I lay in my cell, I could hear continuous sounds of sirens, um,
Blaring.
blaring
Blaring.
as blaring as the entire city were falling apart. Around midnight, the guard came and opened my cell and said I was free to go. To my surprise, I had been released on a personal recognized stance.
Recognizance.
Okay,
That just
recognizance.
mean they let them out without bond.
Okay, cool. I guess they had felt it was was in their best interest to let me out onto the streets. It was Too late. Once a riot has begun, it ends only when the riders near exhaustion. As I walked out of the booking room, I was met by our Lieutenant of Information, Bobby White, and Lieutenant Political Education, Willie Brazier. Man, everything's gone crazy, Willie said. They're fighting cops up on a Cherry Street. They're fighting cops up on Cherry Street, man. It's a full scale riot. We headed back to the Central District, taking side streets to avoid the brigades and the pitched battles between the young riders and the police. As we headed to my parents' house, we could see throngs throngs of young people
Yeah, yeah, throngs of young people rampaging through the
rampaging
streets.
through the streets, overturning car, cop cars and throwing rocks and Molotov cocktails. Scores of cops were grouped together using batons to make attacks on the rock throwing youth. When we arrived at the house, there was a squad of armed Panthers waiting to get involved in the action down at Garfield Park. Aaron, we got to go down and help the young brothers, someone said. I was in a precautious position. The party
Uh,
did not openly advocate attacks on the police. We were supposed to be organizing the masses, helping them to prepare for self defense and eventually guerrilla warfare. If it came to that, we were in no way ready to emerge the cops in warfare. Yet many of the young brothers and sisters writing were friends and probably even relatives of those brothers gathered around holding their shotguns and rifles. I I too was caught up in the emotions and drama of the situation. I decided we should try to make our way down to Garfield on foot. What were we going to do when we got there remained unclear. We got to remain unclear. We headed out slowly, scratch, crouching, scrouching down, crouching along the way, carrying our weapons, unsure of what the hell we were doing. It was long before a police helicopter spied us and shined its spotlights on us. A comrade armed and took out the light with one shot. All of us knew that within seconds we would be surrounded by pigs. Just then we heard a voice. It was our comrade, Ron Carson. Hey, you guys in there, come in here. We was standing, he was standing in the doorway of his enclosed back porch,
Beckoning, yeah,
beckoning.
beckoning.
We ran over there and streamed onto the dark, covered covered porch just as the last man entered. The entire area where we had stood only seconds before was swarming with police cars. The police stayed in their vehicles, shining their spotlights and bushing and behind parked cars. On the porch, we crouched in silence, hoping we would not be detected. Finally, the cops left, recognizing it was foolish to think that under these circumstances we could possibly be successful in an attack on the police. We disbanded. The following evening, the rebellion resumed. Some older members of the central staff suggested that we divide into three groups and ambush the cops. I wanted to argue against such a move. All through the party often invoked guerrilla warfare in articles and pictures in the party paper and on posters despising
Depicting.
depicting armed men and women. The chairman had never once informed me that I was to lead a guerrilla attacks against police forces. At the time, I did not realize that the new chapters and branches over all over the country were grappling with the same dilemma: to attack or not to attack. As generations were, we were not far removed from slavery, and its
Remnants.
remnants were with us constantly. Jim Crow had only recently subsided. We listened to our elders' stories about the rapes, lynching, murders, and brutality committed against our ancestors. We had all the experienced personal conflicts with the police and the daily bites of racism and all its aspects
Aspects.
aspects of our lives. Additionally, the murders of Malcolm X, Medgar,
Medgar
Medgar,
Evers.
Medgar Evers, and most recently Martin Luther King Jr. were still fresh in our minds. At some point, we felt we had to stand up and fight. The party gave us opportunity, and the present situation provided us with an excuse to extract our revenge for the evils of American racism.
You want me take up from here, finish this out real quick?
Yes, please.
Yes. What
All right.
chapter are we on, comrades? My bad.
Chapter, what's this? 15?
Chapter 15. Okay, all power.
Yeah. See, I want to say it's July 1968, Seattle or something like that. All right. Reluctantly, I agree, feeling that my courage will otherwise come under question. That if I refuse to go alone, others would doubt my bravery and sincerity. We divided into 3 teams of 4 or 5 men to a team and chose our operating locations. I ended up with 3 comrades with whom I was very close. Though I was a few years younger, they were loyal and willing to follow me into the battle despite my greenness. Elmer went with another group, and I could only hope that he would be safe. We initially headed to Washington Park, Arboretum, a heavily wooded park not far from the office. Before we had taken our position, one of the comrades, high on speed, inadvertently fired at a passing police car. Luckily, he missed, but we decided we better find a more suitable place for an ambush. We finally located a ridge on a hill that faced a main street. Cars had to stop at the upcoming intersection below. Behind us was a deeply wooded area that led to the Lake Washington. Trails crisscrossed each other, trails that Elmer, Michael, and I had hiked on overcast days, playing war, ducking in and out of bushes, hiding from invisible enemies behind trees. The comrades and I settled in on the ridge for several hours. Many times during the night, I felt the urge to call up the operation, but there was no turning back. I knew I had to follow this through. We lay on that grassy spot for hours, swapping stories about experiences in Vietnam and the wild ghettos of New Orleans, about the women who got away and those we hoped to catch. For the time, it seemed we were brothers in our purpose, a united one. Looking down from one little knoll, we could see the street. Out of nowhere, cutting through the silence of the night, it appeared, our enemy, our prey, the very bane of our existence, a lone police cruiser. No one said a thing. Almost simultaneously, we all took aim and fired. I had the only semi-automatic. I tried to get off at second round, but my rifle jammed. We jumped up and hurried down the steep embankment to the narrow path below, running in the dark as fast as we could. I tripped over a rock, flew up in the air and landed on my shoulder. I grabbed my carbine and we continued toward a long steel staircase separating the forest from a thick patch of blackberry bushes. We climbed over the staircase, unsure whether to go up or down. Then we saw 2 cop cars pull up in the cul-de-sac below. We climbed over the other side of the steps. thrusting ourselves into the thick bushes, trying to blend into the trees and bushes. All of us hoping we were black enough not to be seen. The cops got out of the car with shotguns and flashlights, sweeping the forest, trying to spot the raiders. The four of us stood motionless. Slowly, Lou Jack lowered his 357 and cocked it, preparing to fire. I put my hand on his revolver and shook my head. We all thought for sure we were dead, but the cops, unable to detect our whereabouts, got into their cars and left. We didn't know what to do, but we could not stand there in the bushes much longer. Suddenly, in the distance, I heard a familiar voice calling. We hurried up the steps towards the voice. It was Tanya with little Kathy Jones. Tanya lived nearby, and when she heard the gunshot, she and Kathy came out to investigate. We ran quickly through several backyards to get to their place. A dog stared, barking wildly, and again I had to stop Lou Jack from discharging his weapon. Reaching Tanya's, you open that door. Reaching Tanya's apartment, we ran up the stairs to safety. Throughout the night, we heard sirens. We would learn later that hundreds of police and armed with machine guns had marched through the woods looking for the attackers. Had it not been for Tanya and Kathy, we might not have made it to safety. Of the 3 units sent out that night, only ours had been able to engage the enemy. The riot was over, leaving it in its wake hundreds of thousands of dollars in damage, scores of young people arrested, many of whom would go to prison for years. The riot marked the beginning of a war in the Seattle between the cops and the Black Panther Party. Across the country, the summer of '68 was seen by some as the beginning of the revolution. Elmer and I was named on the front page of the Chicago Sun-Times, along with a picture of Elmer addressing the crowd. Upon seeing this, Ma and my grandmother on my mother's side, who had dreams of Elmer becoming a doctor and Ma becoming a minister, claimed to want nothing more to do with Elmer or me. That summer, we sent our team of firebombers and snipers with the purpose of closing down known racist establishments. One such establishment was the plush Seattle Tennis Club on Lake Washington, the same tennis club that had treated our Black and Jewish tennis team like pariahs during the summer of 1965. Another was Lake Washington Realty, which over the years have refused to do business with Black and Asians. Every time they reopened, we firebombed them again until they moved to a different location and completely boarded up their windows. And there was Bloomer's, the Jewish deli around the corner from Garfield High School. For years, the 2 fat brothers that there had cursed at Black students, talking to them in a very disrespectful manner. Later, they took to selling drugs along with the maple and jelly bars and pastrami sandwiches. At first, we proposed to picket them, position a ring of Panthers around the perimeter of the store. That proved too time-consuming, so we firebombed it. Unfortunately, some establishments were hit that should not have been. The Bremer Brothers Bakery, the Chinese neighborhood grocery store on Yosser, they became innocent victims of payback raids. We also sniped at the fire station around the corner from the office to keep the fire trucks from going out to douse the blazes from the fire bombs. We even used the brick fire station for target practice, and oddly enough, at times the police did not respond. A block from our office was empty, unkept lot with bushes and trees that we used to ambush police cars. That summer, Time and Newsweek published charts of the 10 cities with the highest rates of fire bombing and sniping. We were proud that Seattle was ranked number 1 in fire bombing and number 2 in sniping. Detroit beat us out in sniping, but in the fire bombing category, we were unsurpassed. Both beating out New York, Chicago, Detroit, Philadelphia, and others. The Panthers have put Seattle on the map. All power to the people. Well, as Shaka Zulu would say, all power to the people. So that's the end of that chapter right there. It's a pleasure to have you on, Panther Queen. First time meeting you on one of these book readings. I know I've been absent doing a lot of stuff out here in Indianapolis and also the book tour. Now all that's over, so I'm back at it. You know what I mean? So pleasure to have you on, my sister.
Thank you.
This chapter right here is interesting because we see like the repression of the pigs against the Panthers starting to ramp up. You know what I mean? We start to see like even in Seattle, they locking up Aaron Dixon and some of the other leaders over a bogus charge. You know what I mean? How they was using police repression. Now how this even led to this riot that jumped off out there in Seattle. But one thing that this chapter stands out to me, if I did not know about Aaron Dixon, if I didn't read this book, I wouldn't have known like how important the Seattle Black Panther Party chapter was. You know what I mean? Aaron Dixon and the Seattle chapter was one of the prominent chapters in the United States at that time. You know what I mean? As you see that they own magazines, they number 1 and 2 with fire bombing and sniping and stuff in the country, going against the pigs and stuff. Later on, we're gonna see how they even target them, like Aaron Dixon for assassination. But we'll get to that later. But I think this is important to highlight. It wasn't just Oakland. It wasn't just Chicago. It wasn't just New York City. Seattle was playing a big, huge part in the Black Panther Party legacy at this time. You know what I'm saying? So this is one of the good reasons why I love that Aaron Dixon wrote this book, because we get a chance to see the role that the Seattle chapter played, and even seeing, the importance of Aaron Dixon himself. Like he was we heard about Huey, we heard about Eldridge, we heard about Fred Hampton, Asada Shakur, all these other, but a lot of people don't. I don't know if our generation realized like how much of a role that Aaron Dixon played, at a young age within the party. Like he met a lot of the leaders, had relationships with a lot of the leaders on the West Coast. You know what I'm saying? But that's one thing I love about this book, though, because we see a glimpse of the Panthers that a lot of people are not aware of. You know what I mean? And it really made me want to study some of the other chapters that I really wasn't familiar with around the country that was doing good things. And I think we'll eventually get around to read some of them books about some of them other chapters and have a bigger, more holistic understanding of what the Panthers was doing around the country at that time, instead of just certain chapters and stuff, right? Did you want to add anything to that, Johnny Torres? Yeah, mute your mic if you was talking.
Yeah, like you said, it's good how you're seeing other, like his chapter, like develop itself. It's starting to grow. It's starting to raise awareness. And he was already like in his jail cell, hearing all like the crowd call his name. You can hear the intensity in the air, like it was building up for something more further, like something stronger, like that was about to come. And I think he really like foreshadowed it. He knew what was going to happen if he stuck to what he's going to be doing, because I gotta see it all the way through. So that's what he's doing so far, and it's very well written, and
Well,
so many ways,
yeah.
It's like it's powerful, like
Yeah.
it really does take a hook in you back into the 70s, where where it all began, and he's telling you his origin story right here, where where how the pigs were so brutal on them, and still today. But it's interesting how he's writing his story and with his people around, and for telling his story, but with other people who are attached to his story, other leaders who were there, and they slowly go away, they slowly get caught up, they slowly die by assassination, or they go into police custody. And he's writing about this, very well written, like I said.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you want to add something, Panther Queen or Soul Sister Anna?
Sure. I just want to briefly say that this is the most not only well written, but really explicit view of the riots back then, because back in the late 60s as well as the 70s, America was at the brink of a complete civil race war. Okay. And even President Kennedy knew at that time that he has to do something because of the fact of the Black man always being targeted where enough was enough. And I'm glad that we read this chapter because this is the first book that I read where it really get into the core about the racist attack against our brothers and sisters back then, where it was complete warfare, as if you know, a soldier talking about his experience being in Vietnam, where Vietnam was pretty much right here in the country, right here in every single state, where it was riots after riots. After the death of Dr. Martin Luther King and Minister Malcolm X, this really went into depth, really, I say at a point where it gave a complete illustration of a step by step of what, our brothers and sisters had to do to survive it. And that is to, stand up, pick up a gun, where it comes to Chairman Mao, who said, revolution stands is at the barrel of the at the bottom of the barrel.
Yeah,
So
he said political power grows from the barrel of a
yeah,
gun. Yeah.
right. So I'm glad that Aaron Dixon really included this point, which was a pivotal, very, very in-depth situation that happened all over America back in the days.
Right. Yeah, this is hands down my favorite Black Panther book. Man, when I read his book, man, I was like, man, this is like one of the coldest books ever. And when he told me that he was they was making a TV series, like a TV movie type of series of his book, I was like, man, that didn't hurry up come out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
For
I'll part
real.
to the people. I find it interesting that how they attacked the stores, and pretty much took out the businesses that wasn't helping the people.
Mm-hmm.
I think that that's very important, because if you're not helping your people, then why are you in our community? Just to take our
Right.
money? No, that's
Yeah.
not gonna fly. So, and I feel like it wasn't just a fight just for us Black people. It was for all the people in the community that wasn't
Right.
getting justice. So
Yeah.
that's what really caught my attention as far as this chapter of the book. I really liked it. That all
Absolutely.
power.
All power to the
Yeah.
people. But yeah, I think that's a good point. Because even though, like you right, Sister Anna, the fascists was trying to push it into the direction of race war. It was the Panthers and the revolutionaries that was turning it into a class war. You know what I mean? They at that time they was getting even a lot of flack from some, like like we heard from but Ron Karenga and all them and the pork chop nationalists and stuff. They didn't like the fact that they was allying with whites and Asians and different ethnicities and stuff. But the Panthers was at the forefront of the revolutionary movement and the true vanguard of the 60s. You know what I'm saying? And so they was flipping it on its head while the racists and the white supremacists and fascists was trying to take it that direction. That's one thing we see about the Panthers. They kept on, like Fred Hampton said, we are not fighting, we can't fight racism with racism. We got to fight it with solidarity. We can't fight capitalism with Black capitalism. We got to fight it with socialism. And that's one thing I think was one of the biggest influence of the Panthers, that they always had that class analysis and was able to keep on uniting the people of all demographics
Yeah. Because
against the system.
I really did not understand the aspects of capitalism until I
Yeah,
started studying Fred Hampton and
right,
listening to his speeches, and it all comes together and it makes sense.
right,
So
But you know
yeah.
what? It's so amazing that we look at the laws today, and in Virginia, they still have laws dated back to the Jim Crow. Let me put on my video for a minute. I'm on the floor. They still have laws dated back since the Jim Crow era, where
Mhm.
in Virginia, there's still some discrimination laws where Black and whites can't go to interracial schools. But they really did not try to. Of course, it can be struck down since we no longer in the Jim Crow era, but it's still on the books. And I'm just surprised that it still exists. It still exists. And even in Virginia, you still will be hit with a misdemeanor if you swear curse in the streets. And there's other things
What?
where we have to, we have to pay a poll tax. I mean, it's just so many laws that's so outdated, but it's still on the books, and it was never taken off the books. And this is something that we have to visit the laws in our own states, because you'd be surprised that things are still existing. And this is what Aaron Dixon had mentioned, though. He said, as a generation, we were not far removed from slavery and its remnants. We're with us constantly. Jim Crow had only recently subsided, but he further stated, we listened to our elder stories about the rapes, lynching, murders, and brutality committed against our ancestors. And these are, the stories where, people wasn't really being prosecuted from for these crimes based on race. Because, and again, you got to look at the laws that's on a book, you know, and this is what I see, and there's evidence here in Virginia where it's still on the books. But
Yeah, that's wild. That's wild. It's crazy how different states have different laws and stuff like this that still haven't been nullified, haven't been voided out. But they can at any time start to enforce certain stuff. You know what I mean? Did you have anything you want to add, Shamako, before we close this out?
Yeah, I mean, I guess just a couple of notes about Seattle in general. Well, first off, just it's interesting, man. Like, being from the Bay Area and living in Seattle for 3 or 4 years, this all feels so personal. Like I lived up the street from Garfield. I'm like, I know what he's talking about. Anyway, that's just me being silly. But I think Seattle, it's weird. It's almost, it isn't always treated like a Bay Area or a Chicago or LA or New York, but historically it's in the same class. Like, if you study cities in the United States that have been instrumental in any economic boom that America has had, Seattle pretty much since its inception has always been a part of that. Like, it was a part of the logging and fishing boom and the pioneering boom of the West Coast. It was, part of the manufacturing boom post World War II. Part of the tech boom. Like, it's like economically, and it's interesting. Seattle is the one place in the United States where the wages of Black people have been the closest to white people historically throughout the history of the country. And not just that, but when you think about it in terms of protest, right? Right. So there's this, but I mean, and that tradition continues. The World Trade Organization protests of the late 90s, early 2000s, that period, which I'm pretty sure Sherry was out there for that. During Occupy, there was a huge Occupy settlement out in Seattle. They had a whole, section that recently, BLM with the Chaz, the autonomous zone, which that was a whole national story. So I mean, I just think, we talk about Seattle, to the point that was made earlier. It's almost like a I don't want to say this wrong, like a redheaded stepchild, but I think history proves otherwise. That it's just as significant a historical ground as any other city in the United States. Pass.
I think
go ahead.
I think that's a good point you made, comrade, because it's crazy that certain cities don't get the recognition, but they be in the same class as other cities and stuff, you know what I mean? And that's for good and bad, you know what I mean? It's just ironic. Like a lot of people did, when I was on the East Coast, a lot of people didn't real, I ain't gonna say a lot of people, but I was talking to one comrade, and she was talking about Indianapolis, and she was thinking that Indianapolis was kind of like Iowa. I was like, no, Indianapolis is like, it's a lot of Black people here. You know what I mean? There's a lot of history here. You know what I mean? But it's ironic though. Let me ask you one question, Shamako. Because here in Indianapolis, we had a chapter of the Black Panther Party, but you don't see no trace of it nowhere. Like growing up, I didn't know it was ever a chapter of the Black Panther Party here, nowhere. You know what I mean? I don't think a person can grow up in Oakland or Chicago or New York and not know that it was the Black Panther chapter that was prominent out there. You know what I'm saying? How is that out when you was in Seattle? Does it seem like people knew about that history? It was very, like, you was aware really of that?
So that's funny. So yeah, I mean, just first off, to your point about the Bay Area, yeah, I mean, you can't drive around Oakland and not know, because there's like a mural every 3 blocks. You know what I'm saying? Like you finna recognize that this is where the Panthers is from,
right?
Whether you like it or not. You know what I mean? But so it's when my introduction to Seattle came through hip hop education.
Okay.
And the people I was working with at the time were actually working with Aaron Dixon.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So my introduction to Seattle movement in hip hop also came with an introduction to that history.
Right.
Which
right.
I don't know that that's a guarantee in every instance.
Right.
But I think it speaks to the continuation of that legacy in that area. I mean, right. I think one of the things that we used to talk about a lot, like in terms of the music industry in Seattle, right? Because you have like Sir Mix-a-Lot. So, and it's the same, right? It doesn't seem the same, but it is. Like, compare Sir Mix-a-Lot and his relationship to Seattle, assuming you even know that's where he's from.
Yeah, I didn't know that. Right? You just taught me something.
Right. Like to say like Detroit, right? And right. Motown, and what Motown means to Detroit. Right. Right. Or what Death Row means to LA.
Right.
Right. And so Seattle's kind of on an island. All like that was, even in hip hop, that was a big part of its posture. Like, we never get the props. You know what I mean?
Right.
But it's very aware of itself. Like, it knows its own history. And makes an effort to continue that legacy.
Okay.
Good question, by the way.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Like Seattle would be really glad if Seattle was in the house, right? They would be super glad you asked that question.
Right.
It was like a panel, like there would have been a 1 hour conversation just about that.
Right.
Brothers, I just know during that time period, if we look at the world of music, especially with hip hop, I know a lot of artists was explaining exactly the reality of what actually have taken place in the street, which a lot of musical moguls, excuse me, were so entrenched about, the inner city life, the inner city crime, and the inner city warfare that actually went on that that caused a whole lot of record sales because it was on wax, and people really got an inner view of what was really taking place. And reading this chapter again, and looking at the youth that was involved in the Panthers, I know they had to, couldn't believe that they have to really have gear themselves up for all out warfare, guerrilla warfare on the police, where they have to strategize themselves not just to survive, but literally have taken their oath in hand, where they were prepared to die for the people, in which on page 123, in the same chapter where Aaron has said, I was in a precarious position. The party did not openly advocate attacks on the police. We were supposed to be organizing the masses, helping them to prepare for self-defense and eventually guerrilla warfare if it came to that. So impressed me that here are the Panthers serving the community, and seeing the community as a village to help us teach each other. But at the same time, they were actually there to guard the community where it will cost them their lives. They were ready to die for that. Black power.
One thing it shows me though is what a generation was wrestling with.
Mhm.
You had people that was advocating like Eldridge Cleaver, get out in the streets and start the guerrilla war now. I like the fact that Aaron Dixon was talking about a lot of the chapters around that time, they were wrestling with the same questions. You had the people like Huey P. Newton, on the other hand, they said revolution is a protracted struggle, and there was going to be different phases in it. He talked about how the survival programs pending revolution is the strategy in preparing for a revolutionary struggle. So when I see that part in that chapter, it highlights to me some of the stuff that our generation wrestle with even to this day, where some people feel like we need to be more aggressive in the armed struggle aspect. But then you have the other ones like me that say, well, that's a part of it, but that comes into play right now as defense. You know what I'm saying? Doing security, preparing our people to be comfortable with the gun, comfortable in being able to protect our community from these white supremacists coming there shooting up our community, protecting our events that we do and stuff like that. You know what I mean? But at the end of the day, the emphasis right now is the political education and the survival programs pending revolution. You know what I mean? That's where we at. And I think Aaron Dixon's book highlights the fact that we have answered that question, that our generation has to understand that political education and building survival programs is what we are supposed to do at this phase. That's not to say that we shouldn't develop like armed forces within security forces within, the Second Rainbow Coalition, which we already have some, like the Brown Berets. They do a very good job on, building up their security apparatus. To some extent, you got the Young Lords. To some extent, you got the White Panthers that's a part of developing that. But that's the key. I think our generation in our movement, we took away. And I think that's why we're better prepared in some ways, where we don't have to wrestle with questions that the Panthers had actually answered for us and stuff. You know what I mean? So that's one thing I like that he pointed out, because that was a real struggle at that time. Like, do we get out in the streets like like Eldridge Cleaver and go to war now? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And one thing we see even in this book right here, there was a lot of places that was still trying to figure out what revolution looked like. You know what I'm saying? What that meant to the people. What is that social economic system? How does that end? The people wasn't fully on board in a lot of ways with what the Panthers' message were at that time. They agreed with the social programs. They agreed with standing up against the police. But some of them were still wrestling with questions of what socialism is. You know what I'm saying? How that would benefit their lives and stuff. And we can't have no revolution here without the masses understanding what we fighting against and what we fighting for. And in a way where they're willing to risk their own lives for this. Go ahead, Sister Anna. We're going to close this out pretty soon because I don't want to be on here too long. But go ahead, Sister Anna.
Okay, just very briefly, this comes down to those who look at the Panther in a romantic view versus those who are seeing the Panthers in a realistic manner. And it comes down to what you're saying, brother. How can you fight for something when you don't know the ideology? You don't know the terms. You don't know too much except for the people that wear the leather coats and the tams or the berets, and thinking that the mission of the Panther is security work when it's not. You're looking at some parts of it, but you got to look at the whole. And it's just like one revolutionary said, without revolutionary theory, you don't have a revolutionary movement, because you can't stand post and not know exactly what the heck you stand and post for, or being in the action, or going into guerrilla warfare or warfare to say. You have to learn, you have to read, you have to know the true mission. And one way of knowing that is taking that manual, dissect it, read it like you're reading about your legendary, so you have a better understanding and you know exactly what you're doing. Because you'll be looking straight up like a fool out in these streets and getting and risking more arrests because of the fact you don't understand what's going on. That's all I have to say. Black Power.
No doubt. Appreciate that, comrade. But yeah, that's where we at. That's why this stuff that we doing is so important, because we teaching a whole generation what we supposed to be fighting for. Understanding the different contributions that our ancestors made. Some of them is living legends like Aaron Dixon that's still alive today. You know what I'm saying? But also to not make the same mistakes. That's why I love this book so much, because it's comprehensive. You're learning the good, you're learning the bad, you're learning the ugly. You know what I'm saying? And that's the only way we can not romanticize about the past, but take away the positive and adapt that to our times and make the best of for our generation. You know what I mean? Did you want to leave us with anything, Panther Queen, before we close out? You know what? I have a question for you, because you live in Oakland, right? You from Oakland?
No, I don't live in Oakland. I'm in LA.
Okay.
Yeah, but I always
LA,
go to Oakland because my auntie is from the original party, so I'm always out there.
Okay, so Oakland, Los Angeles. Growing up, I asked you the same question I asked Mako. Growing up, what age did you start to realize about the legacy of the Black Panther Party? Like, was you real young? Like,
I was really young. My mama wanted to be involved with the party, but her father, which is my grandfather, was in the military, and he told her, if you have anything to do with the party, don't come back home. So,
wow.
But I learned about the party really at a really young age. But everything I learned, I did through research, and my auntie told me a lot about it too. But as far as in my immediate family, because my grandfather was in the war, it wasn't talked about.
What about the community? Was it like a lot of people in the community out in Los Angeles? Was that like something that was you just grew up taking for granted, that everybody recognized the legacy of the Black Panther Party, knew who Huey P. Newton was, Bobby Seale? Yeah.
Yeah. And I always tried to, because it's a lot of gang violence. So I always used to try to tell my homeboys, why y'all killing each other? It's a different war that we need to fight, and it's not amongst each other,
Right.
you know? So,
Right.
yeah,
All power to the people. Well, anyway,
all power to the people.
all power. So I try to keep these like under like an hour and about an hour and a half. I know we went over a little bit, but I think this was a good discussion. We got another one this Sunday. Is it 9 p.m., Sister Anna?
Yes, it is. We may have Joe to moderate in place of another Conrad who wasn't able to do so. So I look forward to that, but he probably need help as far as with the tech part and sharing the files. So this way we can read along together as, you know, a group or as a team. If not, I'll be on standby and read, and we have our other co-moderators as well, but I look forward to that. So stay tuned and come and join us for another discussion.
No
Yeah,
doubt.
let me know if you need help, because I'll be able to help out
So
too.
good. Black Power, I appreciate that, sister.
All right, comrades. Well, we're going to conclude this. I got to get up early tomorrow. We got an event here in Indianapolis. We got a concert we putting on for the community, inviting people out. We've been fighting, as y'all saw. Got 2 indictments last week on the Justice for Herman Whitfield case. First time we ever got indictments on the police here in Indianapolis. You know what I'm saying?
Wow.
So, yeah, we trying to keep the community engaged. So when these pigs start going to trial, the community come out and stand and let the prosecution and everybody know we ain't gonna allow this to go not guilty. Like, y'all gonna find these pigs guilty. So we trying to do stuff creatively here for the community. My comrade Leon Benson, as y'all know, did 25 years in prison. Recently was released from his wrongful conviction, been exonerated. You know what I'm saying? So he gonna be one of the performers out there tomorrow. So yeah, we got a big day tomorrow. So about to get ready for that. But appreciate you, comrades, coming on. Keep on sharing these with the other ones and the United Panther movement and the various Guardian Rebellion. Because we really want more of the rank and file people of these organizations to be, jump on here. Usually we have a lot more people than this. It might be something going on tonight. I don't know. It's pretty warm outside in certain places, so so people might be out and about today. But yeah, I appreciate y'all comrades coming on. And the next one this Sunday with the Sunday group. So everybody have a good night. All power to the people.
All right, all power to the people.
Black Power.